Hi, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. Today I want to talk to you about garden design, and in particular our concerns around design. We're trying to get areas of high impact, drama, something that when we have visitors to the farm here, when we give tours, that people can say that was worth visiting. Now, given that we're a rose farm, one of the easiest tools we had at our disposal for high impact was climbing roses. And of course, when you talk about climbing roses, you have to give them something to climb. So that's what all this behind me here is. Of course, these pergolas were prefab, and I'll give you a closer look at those, but the wooden structure behind it that we've built kind of to match in a curved configuration is something that we built ourselves, and it's going to host 5 roses across the front of it. Each of these pergolas can host up to 4 roses, and then we have some other areas that we've built for climbing roses around the yard here. So that's what I want to talk about today, is how is it that you add impact to your garden with climbing roses and what you should have them climbing. One of the things I love about the structure and the way it came together is that it's actually different from every angle. So when I look at it from this side here and that curved bed on the ground, you can see that it's echoed or repeated in the curve of the woodwork up above it. That curve was sort of the first design consideration because I wanted it to match in a certain way with this curve over here of this garden bed, the flow of which means that customers coming from the parking lot, which is sort of back this way behind the pergola there, would follow the path, and this curve would sort of make the boundary of where they are walking, and then the natural path would be then to curve to the right with that garden bed and then head along the property towards the rose garden in the far distance there. So that's sort of the path we wanted to make for people, and we wanted to make it sort of organic. And like I say, one of the nice things about it is how it turned out that it looks different from every angle. So from here, you don't see that curve so much, you just see a beautiful background structure. But then as you approach it from the side, that curve above the garden bed becomes far more apparent. And I'll just give you one more angle here, and I'll give you some overheads as well if it's helpful. But as we back up from it on this side, it gives the garden a whole other view. These prefab pergolas just came together in a kit, so I won't bother giving you any kind of insight into those, except to say that we thought it was important to get them onto these concrete blocks in the corners, and that those could be situated to be very flat, very straight, and lock it into a perfect position compared to the back one. It's the kind of details that people will notice, if not consciously, then subconsciously, if something's a little out of alignment. So what we had to do to get that done is we had to build a little wooden jig to put those 4 in all at the same time and make sure they were level to each other, straight to each other, flat to each other, and all that. I'll give you some views of that process, but that's about the only skill it took to put that together. Now, the roses are the star of the show here, and I couldn't wait. I had to get some roses in the ground right now, even though we're going into late fall. This first one on the front that's going to touch the back corner of the pergola is Ramblin' Red, and it was repeating so nicely elsewhere in the garden that I moved it here. The next one over is one called Isabella Skinner. Now, that's going to go up this pole here, and this is also known in the US or marketed as Victorian Memory, and unfortunately it is, even though it's a Canadian bred rose, it's quite uncommon in the trade in Canada. So it's something that Rick from the Summerland Garden, who we toured last year, gifted me. It comes with a bit of a story, but he gifted that to me to help put it back into the trade. The next one here is a rose called Compassion. Once again, a rose that comes with a story because it was given to me by local rosarian David Wilson, who has recently retired from the trade. And so where I have pictures, I will insert those as well. I've left an empty spot in the middle here. The middle row, I'm hoping it goes out to Crepuscule, which is a tea noisette, but I need to propagate that one to be really sure I have it healthy before I put it into the garden. This one here is a rose called Honeymoon. That's a Cortez rose. That's sort of white or just off-white. So that's going to balance out some of the colors there, because I've had red, pink, pink. This will be white. This goes back to a stronger pink. This is John Davis. And like I mentioned, for very cold tolerant roses, it's kind of unusual that they're so strongly repeat blooming, but this one is a repeat blooming rose that's totally cane hardy down to, I think, zone 3 or something like that. It's pretty tough. And then the final one I have placed already is a pink and white rambling rose called Blushing Lucy, which also has a good repeat going into the late season. Swinging around here, we have this big, ugly power pole that we can't do that much about. So because it has its guide wire across the back there, all we could do is really put in a garden bed to try to disguise it and make sure that nobody could walk right into that overhead line. And of course, a couple more climbing roses that we've put over here to help us disguise them over time. This is Constance SPry. I think that's one of David Austin's first very prominent roses, so it deserves a place of honor. And on this side here, Baltimore Belle, which is delicate looking like Isabella Skinner, but also deceptively hardy. Well, that is some threatening weather if I've ever seen any, so I'll try to get the rest of this tour done quickly. And like I say, I'll insert some photos if I can, but for now, you'll see them not in color. But that one on the back pole there, that is Lady Ash, sort of a colorful variant of Aloha. Along this backing here, we have Florentina, sort of a beautiful red Cortez climber. Showing up here, we have Lady of Shalott. And on the other side of the same support, I have Rosanna. Now, if that starts to get out of control, I can always kind of jump it over to this backing here, which doesn't have climbing roses, but just a couple of clematis on it. Heading over this way, I have two climbing roses on this archway here. And one on the left is Danae, and the one on the right is Malvern Hills, a beautifully performing David Austin rose. And maybe it will be the one exception I can give you where we're going to see a little bit of color today. I mean, just repeat bloom to the max on Malvern Hills, at least in my garden. This wide section of lawn here that's bounded on both sides with that split rail fence, we call it the sort of walking boulevard or walking area as the approach to our rose garden down at the far end. And each side has some pillars, and we built those in a previous video. The roses haven't done so much to get up them yet, but we're hoping that that's happening this year. And of course, at the bottom of this one here is Etoile de Hollande. And of course, across the split rail fence here, we've been able to train a bunch of roses sort of horizontally. They are climbers, but a lot of climbers display their best blooms or bloom their best when pegged down or tied horizontally. And this one, Rosarium Uetersen, is still throwing a little bloom, but it is one of my most commonly in bloom roses in the garden. And following all the way down, just about every time we have a turn in this fence, I have a new climbing or rambling rose. This one being Geschwinds Orden. On the other side here, going up the pillar, that one is Narrow Water. This spot here is reserved for Buff Beauty, which I absolutely love. This one here is Heaven's Eye, and then on the final spot over here, I have Leverkusen climbing up here, putting on a valiant effort. The rose garden obviously has a big archway in the front and a big archway on the back. And what better way to greet people to the rose garden than a couple of big climbing roses. This one here will have Don Juan on the left, which is making some progress. And then actually Eden has put on a lot of growth this year. On the back archway of the rose garden, on the left here, I have the wide open blooms of Meg, and on the right, we have a noisette rose called Lamarck, which is just establishing there now. As formal and geometric as those first black pergolas were, this is a counterpoint to that, being far more casual, just post and beam in a long row here. that is going to display 8 of my climbing roses. This one, Autumn Sunset, is starting to put on enough growth that I think it will be impressive next year, and I've just tied it onto the rails here with a little bit of twine. This one here as well is Blue Magenta, Rambling Rose in a beautiful burgundy color. One other great use for climbing roses is to disguise the ugly, and this structure here, of course, we'll do something with it eventually, but for now, just to get some of the bare wall and the disjointedness of it covered, I have Royal Sunset on the left here. We have Madame Alfred Carrere in the center and Alchemist on the right, and they've put on a ton of growth. They seem to love this spot where the old compost pile was. So that was a quick overview of this project and of the climbing roses we're putting in place all the way around the property. And I guess if I had one thing to advocate for, it's that don't think of fall and winter as a dead time for gardening. This is the time for planning, if not planting, and certainly building any supports and getting plans in place to have climbing roses as a design feature of your gardens. If you have any questions, please drop those down below in the comments of the video. I'll see what I can do to help.